Hello, I'm Dr. Jerry Jones, and I teach advanced electrocardiography. I've created a few short videos for YouTube that can alert you to problems with certain ECG misinformation on the internet. Today we're going to talk about misinformation that affects compensatory and non-compensatory pauses. So let's get started. Let me start off by saying that there are some excellent, reputable, and very dependable websites and YouTube videos about electrocardiography. Unfortunately, however, there are some that are produced by people who have little or no true understanding of electrocardiography or ECG interpretation. I've created a few short videos to give you sort of a heads-up warning that you may be visiting such a site or viewing such a video. Today, we're going to discuss misinformation about compensatory and non-compensatory pauses. Okay, so what does a compensatory pause tell us? A compensatory pause tells us one thing and one thing only. The sinus node was not affected by the ectopic beat in question. It was not affected. It has nothing to do with ventricular depolarizations. It does no good to measure RR intervals. The QRS complexes are not even involved. Here we have an example of a non-compensatory pause. The arrow at the bottom of the strip is showing you two normal PP intervals. We measure from P waves to P waves. We do not measure QRS to QRS. Okay, so we see two normal PP intervals. If we go ahead and measure from the P wave at the beginning of the pause to the P wave following the pause, we see that it also is exactly equal to two normal PP intervals. This tells us that the ectopic beat, in this case a PVC, did not enter the sinus node. It had no effect on the sinus node. The P waves are continuing to fall exactly on time. Now, one of them you can't see because obviously it's hidden somewhere in the repolarization wave of the ectopic beat, but it's there and it came right on time because the P wave that follows it is also right on time. Okay, so what does a non-compensatory pause tell us? Well, it simply tells us that the sinus node was indeed breached, it was discharged, and then it resumed its spontaneous phase 4 depolarization. Now, the non-compensatory pause, like a compensatory pause, is measured from the P wave before the pause to the first P wave after the pause. No QRS complexes are measured. A compensatory pause means that the sinus node was not reset, but a non-compensatory pause means the sinus node was reset. Now, only the right atrium and the sinus node are involved, not the QRS complexes. So here we have a double-headed arrow measuring two normal PP intervals. When we move it, we see that the PP interval caused by the P wave before the pause and the P wave after the pause is shorter. It's shorter. Now, I'm going to give you two examples of misinformation regarding compensatory and non-compensatory pauses that I found on the internet. But let me assure you, there's a lot more out there. Here, the people are trying to measure a compensatory or non-compensatory pause by measuring RR intervals. They're measuring from QRS to QRS. This is not correct. Let me assure you, when we are trying to determine whether a compensatory or a non-compensatory pause is present, we measure P waves, from P wave to P wave. We do not I repeat, we do not measure RR intervals. And here's another example. Again, they're measuring RR intervals. Again, we do not measure RR intervals when we're trying to determine whether a compensatory or a non-compensatory pause is present. We measure PP intervals from one P wave to the next P wave. And incidentally, they're not even measuring the RR intervals correctly. When we do measure RR intervals for other reasons, we measure from the onset of the QRS complex to the onset of the next QRS complex. We do not measure peak to peak. Okay, a few questions for you. If you know that the ventricles and the QRS complexes have absolutely nothing to do with whether a pause is compensatory or non-compensatory, then why measure the RR intervals? Do you really think that since sinus rhythm is present, that the PP intervals will automatically equal the RR intervals? Seriously? Let's take a look at this rhythm strip here. This reveals something we call an interpolated beat, a beat that actually falls right between two P waves without interrupting their sequence, without interrupting their rhythm. The ectopic beat does not affect the sinus node. Okay, here is one PP interval. Now that PVC has occurred within that PP interval, but you can even see the P wave that follows the ectopic T wave. So we have one PP interval. Okay, now let's measure one RR interval. Is it the same? Let's compare. No, it's not the same at all. And this is why we do not measure RR intervals. The RR interval can vary widely from the PP interval. So we only measure PP intervals when we're trying to determine whether a compensatory or a non-compensatory pause is present. Okay, everyone, the bottom line is this. The only thing that compensatory and non-compensatory pauses tell us is whether or not the sinus node was reset. If the pause is compensatory, the sinus node was not reset. It was not affected. If the pause is non-compensatory, the sinus node was reset. The depolarization of the ventricles provides no information that needs measurement when determining whether a compensatory or non-compensatory pause is present. So if you see a person determining compensatory or non-compensatory pauses by measuring the QRS complexes, let me assure you they do not understand what they are doing. Did you know you can learn more on my website and also by attending my master classes? I'm Dr. Jerry W. Jones, and I teach master classes in advanced ECG interpretation. Among my classes, I teach the Master Class in Advanced Electrocardiography and the Master Class in Advanced Dysrhythmias. Both these master classes are 4 days long. They're live and in person. Each master class is limited to just 20 participants. There is active participation by all in both classes, and you have plenty of time to ask questions, even during the presentations. Unlike many seminars, you don't have to wait till the end of a session or a presentation before asking your questions. You can ask questions at any time. Learn more about my master classes at my website, https://medicusofhouston.com. I want to thank you all for your time and attention, and join me for my next presentation, which will be announced soon. Now, before you leave, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit that like button. Thanks a lot.